Hey, it's Josh with There's No Business Like, coming to you to talk to you about MAX, the Midwest Arts Expo, this September 15th through 18th in Milwaukee. There's just 1 week left to register with early bird registration, so you need to register by July 14th to take advantage of that $100 off of registration that you get with the early bird registration. After that, the price will go up. But whether you get your registration now or after the price goes up, come and see us while you are at MAX. We will be in booth 511, and myself and other members of the podcast will be there. We'll be talking to you about what we have coming up on the podcast and what we've been working on, and we might even talk to you in the booth on the microphones to be part of the podcast. We'll see how all that goes. But the most important thing is that you join us at MAX September 15th through the 18th in Milwaukee. We'll see you there.
Hi, everyone. It's Katie with There's No Business Like. Welcome back to our Summer Rewind series. We are reaching back into the archives to share some of our favorite conversations. I had a really hard time choosing an episode to revisit, but I decided we all needed to re-listen to Kevin's conversation with Lori L. Jacobwith from March 5th, 2025, just earlier this spring. I know I always talk about how it's great to learn from a podcast while you're doing something else, like mowing the lawn or washing dishes, because I'm all about that multitasking. But this time, I'd encourage you to sit down in one place with a pen and a notepad and really listen to Lori and take some notes, because Lori's insights and ideas around good relationship building, fundraising, and bridge building with audiences and donors are really needed right now. So my advice is, as you listen, jot down the things that strike you and how you can apply them to the situations you're facing right now. And share this episode with your colleagues and have them do the same. I think it could be a really great exercise for team building across departments and getting some creative ideas flowing when we're all feeling a little burnt out. So thanks again to Lori for being part of our podcast journey. I hope you all are having a fantastic summer, and happy listening.
Hello and welcome to There's No Business Like, a podcast where friends and industry colleagues explore topics and interview leaders in our industry of professional theatrical touring.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to There's No Business Like. I'm Kevin Maynard, coming at you from Tallahassee, and as always, I'm joined by my friends, Danielle.
Oh, hey, Kevin. Why do you have such a perfect radio voice? It annoys me every time. I'm Danielle Van Hook from the Alden and McLean, Virginia.
Josh.
I don't think anything about you is perfect, Kevin. Josh Benson, rocking it from Marion, Illinois at the Marion Cultural and Civic Center.
And Katie.
Danielle, why do you have such a perfect face? I could just stare at it all day long. I'm Katie Miller with Michigan Maven Creative Associates in Midland, Michigan.
Perfect. Yes, Danielle does have a face for podcasts. We appreciate that. Thank you, Danielle.
You are going to get it.
Folks, I'm curious, how are you all using AI, or are you using AI in your everyday lives or at your offices?
Well, I will say last night I had to do some really hard math and I didn't really have time to sit down and figure it out. So I did just ask ChatGPT to do the math problem for me, and it was very helpful and it saved me a lot of time.
Was that for Leo's homework or?
No, it was for grown-up homework. I can add 2 + 2. Thank you very much.
I'm not here to judge.
But can you count from 0 to 200 by twos, Kevin? Because my 6-year-old certainly can. I hear it every single day.
I bet ChatGPT can too.
Kid's going to know nothing about odd numbers.
Whenever people send us pictures, often shoulders will be cut off or the photos will be cut too short, and I'll use AI to extend the photos out so that it fits better within our episode graphics.
Nice. Can you have AI extend my torso? Just make me real long.
Yep.
Cool.
Sure can.
Nice.
Kevin, I'm not an early adopter to AI, and I don't have a good reason for that. I love hearing the way that people use AI to make the boring stuff be more efficient. I don't love it when AI makes the art. I struggle with that side of it. But I do really enjoy hearing how people use it to make the boring part of their life better.
Well, friends, our guest today, Lori L. Jacobwith, and I talked a lot about fundraising and the changing philanthropic landscape. Part of that conversation talked a little bit about AI and some of our uses that we're using it for and how folks can use it in their fundraising. So please enjoy my conversation with Lori L. Jacobwith.
I am Lori L. Jacobwith. I am a master storyteller and fundraising culture change expert. Those are self-given titles. The rest of the world probably knows me as a coach and speaker and trainer.
Excellent. Well, Lori, thank you for joining us on There's No Business Like today. I am really excited for today's topic. I'm talking about the changing philanthropic landscape and just some things going on in philanthropy right now. Before we dive into that, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started working in fundraising?
Thank you, Kevin. I really appreciated being invited. I think it's a really important time to be having a lot of different conversations, but especially the ones you have on the podcast here.
Thank you.
As I said, I've given myself some titles over the years. I got started with my love of service and the social sector. You've heard me tell this story when I was a little girl. When I was about 9 or 10, maybe 11, I can't remember exactly, I proudly announced to my parents that I wanted to be governor of Minnesota. And if I couldn't have that job, I thought, well, I'll be a flight attendant so someone can pay me to travel around the world. My family came from a background of service. We volunteered at church. We volunteered at the Summer Aquatennial Festival here in Minneapolis. We volunteered for political candidates. So giving back and helping others was a big deal. I ended up going to school for political science and communication, graduated, and got to work for the governor of Minnesota. He ended up coming to my wedding back in the 90s.
Wow.
And I realized, I drove him around. I talked to him a lot. I didn't want his job. A lot of compromise, a lot of fundraising, a lot of tough days. That was many years ago. I can't imagine today. But I learned fundraising skills over about 3 years of working on political campaigns. I mean, fast, furious fundraising. And we didn't have the internet, and we mostly were on the phone. So I would make calls with elected officials in the morning and go pick up checks in the afternoon.
Wow.
So I took those skills to the nonprofit sector, and I really have never looked back. I worked for a training company for a while based in Seattle. I traveled 98 cities a year, so someone was now paying for my travel. But I tell people I would pinch myself because I would hear the good news of what's going on in the world with all of the many thousands, really tens of thousands of organizations that I've worked with around the world. I've been able to be executive director of nonprofits, development director, board member. I've gotten to see the good, the bad, and the ugly. I started my company, Ignited Fundraising, in 2007. I just am grateful that I don't feel like I work. I feel like I'm getting to volunteer with all these wonderful organizations. And the one measure that I have that tells me something is working is the organizations that have reported back to me. I have helped organizations raise somewhere between $500 million and maybe $750 million, somewhere in that range. I don't know exactly, but we've harnessed some dollars for the good.
Wow, that's a whole lot of impact. Lori, you mentioned something I'm really curious about. So you said that you were working with the governor, and then you took those skills to the nonprofit sector. Was that because of your family sort of like start in service, or was there a moment that you're like, oh, I want to be working in the nonprofit sector?
I loved the fundraising part of those political campaigns, and that's where I got placed. I was able to help plan events. I was able to drive elected officials around. Senator Paul Simon, who came in from Illinois, Daniel Inouye, who came in from Hawaii, Ted Kennedy at the time. We talked a lot about fundraising. And so the segue was just effortless, really. Where can I go to take these skills and do some more good?
Excellent. And so you mentioned in your intro that you are self-titled, self-recognized as a master storyteller and fundraising culture change expert. Can you define a little bit what you mean by fundraising culture change expert?
Yeah, I wear that title proudly. And I have people ask me questions about it a lot. Because I've worked with thousands of organizations, nonprofit organizations of every shape, size, color, you name it, lots and lots of arts organizations. So what I've learned is to include the entire organization when it comes to creating a successful fundraising environment. Some people call it a culture of philanthropy. Fundraising is asking people for money. Fund development is making the community aware of why the dollars are needed. And you do that by partnering with your staff, by partnering with your board, by partnering with other members of your team. So your bookkeeper might be noticing, if they're helping do the data entry, that there's a donor that keeps increasing their gift size. You might not have noticed. If they notice and tell you, now you can make that phone call or invite them to something. Your program staff sees the impact on an individual basis, whether it's actors showing up regularly in a volunteer arts organization or a different kind of program that's out in the community. They've got the nuggets of what I call mission moments that you can expand on in email appeals, in one-on-one conversations. Your board members, if they place a value, because you've trained them to, on donor recognition, they can make phone calls to thank people who've given their time, their talent, their stuff, or their money. And the amazing statistic is research tells us when a board member makes a thank you call versus a staff person, that person's gift that they're thanking is often, their next gift is often up to 39% higher.
Wow.
What I tell people is you're not doing fundraising in a little tiny vacuum. Or if you are, it's going to feel like a slog all the time. But if you work in an organization that values mission moment story collection, donor recognition, repeat donor noticing, all of that, now you've got a culture that changes. And so when I come in to work with an organization, we look at everything, not just how are we sending out an email appeal or what does the contribution, campaign look like. It takes a bit more time. It takes buy-in from different levels, but it's been effective in my experience in building sustainable changes in an organization that last forever. And it doesn't just depend on who's got the development director role.
Wow. I can see why you wear that badge proudly. Like that's a holistic approach that involves the entire organization, that even thinking about those like small moments, like they can lead to bigger moments. And I'm thinking right now, like, how can I be doing this with my team a little bit better? So like, I love that. That's fantastic.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Lori, let's dive a little bit into the topic that we want to talk about today. And that's the changing philanthropic landscape. You and I have talked about that we've seen a number of changes throughout the past 5 years because a lot has happened. I mean, honestly, even just in the past few months, we've seen a lot of changes. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've been seeing?
Yeah, I have to take a deep breath even to answer that question, right?
Yeah.
So much has changed in the last 10 days.
Absolutely.
In the last month, for sure. The pandemic certainly changed a lot. You and I I've got gray hair. You don't have so much, if any. So we've seen change happen in 2001, 2008. But right now, this tsunami, if you will, is causing a bit of a contraction. I had a couple of phone calls over the last 2 days since I knew I was going to be a part of this discussion to talk to some of my colleagues. And from what I have watched with clients and some former clients, individuals are giving to fewer organizations. Corporations and foundations, many are changing their giving guidelines like weekly, if not daily, given what's going on in our government right now. Basic needs granting is eclipsing any sort of extra. And unfortunately, the arts and DEI programming are included in that umbrella of luxury or extra. Government funding, of course, has never been more uncertain. Arts especially places like the NEA are not places to count on. That's the bad news. The good news is people are hungry for what action should I be taking right now. The two conversations that I had just yesterday, my colleagues did a great job of gathering information for me to tell me how their organization is doing financially. What are the changes with NEA funding and government grants? What are they doing? How much? What is that doing with their program? I was in awe really of how succinct. I mean, I asked them for 10 minutes of their time and how inspiring and passionate. The passion is always there, but they just were spot on. And what I asked them is, are you telling your community what you told me? And what they said sort of scared me a little bit, if you will, because they both said, well, we can't speak this candidly to our donors. And I said, wait a minute. Now is the time. People are just like me, wanting to know, what do you need? I had just gotten an e-newsletter from one of these organizations the day before, and all the programming looked good and all and they talked a little tiny bit about their funding gap of what they have to raise before year end, but they were not being clear. They weren't being what I say to do, and that is be bold and clear. If you're holding back now, at a time when we are experiencing unprecedented uncertainty, your donors will go elsewhere. And I happen to believe arts supporting donors are special. They know the value of what programming does, what performances do, what community education does. That's why they're there. But they need to know the truth. Donors may be giving to fewer organizations, but they're still giving. Make sure you're one of those organizations that they're giving to. I would mention the podcast that your team just dropped a couple of days ago on community engagement. Community engagement is creating experiences that are relevant so people stay engaged beyond that performance or that transactional ticket purchase. That's what is working right now. People are on their phones or on their social media looking for, what do I do? So staying in communication is a big deal.
Lori, when you talk about being bold and clear and really that candid conversation, are you talking about those one-on-one conversations with your donors, or your social media and your email blast to them, or is that a combination of all of those things?
All of them.
I wonder if you can dive in a little bit deeper on that, because I think for many folks in the industry right now, the concern is that if we voice this too loud, that it sort of, might paint a target on us, or it might cause people who have different, honestly, political beliefs to try to take some sort of retribution. Do you have any advice on that for the best way to approach that?
Well, there's a couple things. One, we don't know the future, more so than ever before. Mm-hmm. Won't you, let's say you as someone who is mm-hmm. part of an arts organization, won't you be disappointed in yourself and or your team if you don't look under every rock and talk to everyone that you possibly can? Some organizations are going to go away. Some are going to fold. That's the reality. That's the painful reality. And that's not just arts organizations. That's across the board. And we've seen that with USAID, longtime client, Center for Victims of Torture. 80% of their staff is gone.
Wow.
So there's some things to do. And then decide, how will we share this information? How will we articulate it in a way that is not begging? It is not the sky is falling, but it is the truth. So the first of 5 things you can do is know your numbers. And that will change probably minute to minute, day by day. What grants are you not getting? What individuals have you not seen or talked to for a while? What's your budget projection for this week, this moment in time? Know those numbers. How many staff is it affecting? How many students? How many community members? Then, as you talked about on the podcast the other day, connect with your community. So what does that look like? Pick up the phone and call individual donors. Pick up the phone and call your institutional funders. A lot of institutional funders, from what I could glean and the two I talked to, they're waiting. They're in a wait and see mode. Like, we're not going to change a lot right now. We're not going to give any big grants. We might give some small bridge dollars. You're not in a wait and see time frame. So you want to be articulate, have a more action oriented approach. I can just hear people, as I say the words, pick up the phone. You and I know it is one of the most despised tools that we have in our sector, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it works. I had a young gentleman call me, and I told my spouse, Mark, I said, I think I just experienced the Fuller Brush engagement of the 2025s as a man calling to find out what information I needed to know about Medicare. And he's coming to visit me next week. I picked up the phone because it was an area code that I trusted. And he had the right words to say immediately. I'm not selling you anything. We provide this as a service. So as an arts organization, calling to say, thank you for your support and all the funding you've provided. I am not calling to ask you for money. I wanted to know, would you like to, and here's part of the community engagement, attend one of our Zoom updates, attend one of our behind the scenes, on the stage circle conversations where you keep people for 15, 20 minutes with some information that you share, and then allow them to ask you questions. And you're now answering what people need and want to know. You can do those as video shares on social media too. I mean, it doesn't have to be like a big production, and these things don't have to be pretty and well produced. The third thing that always is relevant, but more so now than ever, is to share specifics about the lives being touched. And I don't mean that your staff will lose their jobs. While that is important, what about the long-time subscriber to your theater programs, that senior who looks forward to coming to shows and can no longer because you're going to close? Or an organization I did some work with, Live Arts in Charlottesville, volunteer run, always providing plays that are new works. They're cutting edge. What's going to be missing? So talk about whose life is different. I call those mission moments. Number 4 is to share specifics about not just what's being cut, but what does it take to fully fund your mission? That's your money story. Not in an asky way, not in a way that has people feel like you're begging. Julie, the young woman, said to me yesterday, she said, Lori, we're making the most critical decisions about our existence that we've ever made in a 15, 20-year organization. And I don't want to do that in a vacuum, but I also don't want to feel like I'm begging people to keep us alive. I said, then just say that. Tell the truth, but with some dollars, some numbers, so I understand it. And the last thing is continue to thank and see and touch and feel the people who are supporting you, whether it be a shout out on social media or a text. I was a little disappointed. I did make a contribution to one of the arts organizations yesterday. Not big, but I heard her. I don't need a letter. I made that contribution online. All I needed was a text to say, thank you. That would have meant the world. And it would have taken 3 seconds, and it would have saved postage, paper, and time. So speed in that recognition, and don't make it hard for ourselves. People who are thanked give again and again and again.
Excellent advice, Lori. Lori, I do have a couple questions sort of about, we've talked about that the philanthropic landscape is changing. Is there any changes that you think that organizations should be thinking about as we move forward? Like, are there opportunities to use different technology, or how that's going to affect? Like,
it. AI is our best friend.
Yeah.
If I'd had AI when I was a brand new fundraising professional, I would have looked so smart. and I would have accomplished so much more. You can have thank you letters written and edited and in different versions. You can use AI to help give you a timeline for community engagement or donor engagement. You can take a few nuggets of a story and AI will write the story for you. There are paid versions of AI that will create graphics for you. I have a framework of how to write a story, a free resource on my website. It's 2 pages. You can download it. You can upload that to AI, put your name, age, a little bit of information, and AI will write you a story that's warm and engaging. So you don't have to be the best at 25 things anymore because AI will help you do it. For sure, that's one. The pandemic brought us Zoom and video conferencing. Donors don't have to leave their house to be engaged. One of the things that a number of organizations we put into their calendar and existence during the pandemic that they're still doing is monthly updates from the CEO in a very invitation-only format. So it is a quick hello, a thank you, a story about someone whose life is different, a bit on the finances, and any shout outs to who's in attendance, and then taking questions for a few minutes. I watched an organization hold a couple of them during the pandemic, and one of the very first ones, we did a sort of kick the tires with a gentleman, and this was a solo on purpose because we were curating groups. But this solo one was a very, very wealthy man who was very passionate about the organization. He said, let me look at that gift chart again that you said you're launching during this time to do this special work. Would it be okay if I'm not the $2 million gift, but I'll be one of your $4 million gifts? Kevin, we got $1 million gift after a 24-minute conversation because we were so succinct, inspired, wow. And we let him know this is not an ask. This is how are we presenting our message about what's going on right now? Would you like to weigh in and tell us how to be better at presenting that? And he had feedback. But after he finished his feedback, he said, now bring up that gift chart and let's talk about what I can do. We had that money in, I think, 48 hours. Wow. Saved our organization.
That's incredible. I love that idea. I do want to circle back on AI real quick, because I know for our industry, and a lot of folks are really hesitant to use AI for a lot of reasons. But I do think that what you touched on is so important about using it to help write some thank yous, help create the framework for a timeline of contacting your donors and when to touch base. I have sort of a rule for myself where if it's going to be a letter from me, I won't let AI write it. However, I will upload some ideas into AI to help me formulate what those thoughts are. A slight change to that rule: when I have to handwrite a thank you letter, I do have it help me make me more succinct because my handwriting's not great. So it takes me a long time to write it. Right. It's long. So, but yes,
funny. I do the opposite. If I have to write something, I'll ask AI to do it. And then I take that and I just put Lori into it. Okay. So I just take a few sentences from it because it gets my brain started.
Yeah.
And I'm not looking at a white piece of paper, but either way is powerful. Right? Now you're not stuck. One of the things that I think in any industry, but for sure our sector happens is we have so many tasks that have to get done. We get into a habit of doing the tasks like entering data or deciding what the program's going to look like or figuring out the calendar, or we forget that donor engagement and community engagement is the thing that fuels our work. And if you measure the amount of time that you put into having people feel good about buying their tickets or attending a performance or coming to just that Zoom session, the weight would be way less on the side that I'd like to see it on. And that is having people whose passion, support, dollars fund us, have them feel great so that when you, Kevin, call me and say, Lori, would you be a part of this Zoom gathering? Bring your wine or your tea or your coffee. We're going to have it at 4:00. I want some input on what we're going through right now, but how I'm articulating it. Mm. We've got a lot of emotional bank buildup because you've seen me multiple times with that text or that short email or that you bought season tickets again for the 10th year. That doesn't have to be a letter. That can be a text or an email. So the other tools that we have are the speed of technology. I think we don't use those enough in our community engagement, especially in our fundraising community engagement.
That's a really great point.
The one thing I didn't mention in my sort of 5 actions you can take, but I would say underscores all of it, is to listen. Listen for where people are hungry for more information. Listen to what they're concerned about in their lives, and then point out what you're offering that can help with that, or take away some of the pain of that, or but listen, have an ear to the ground. That's a lot to do when some organizations right now aren't sure they're going to be open in 2, 3, 4 months or by the end of the year. So taking a breath just to say, okay, I'm going to take 3 minutes today and walk through a rehearsal or walk down the block in our neighborhood and ask people, what are you hearing? What are you hearing about us? What are you hearing about what's going on, in the world right now? It helps us be better community members, for one. It helps us be better stewards of the experience for donors, for volunteers, for our board. Can you imagine? I can't imagine being a board member in a nonprofit that's struggling right now. It's a lot. But I will say, I've got a story to share. If you would it be all right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I worked with this organization that is a Native American arts gallery. It was a while ago. I want to say like 15 years ago. Tiny, 3 staff. They're in Minneapolis in that George Floyd Lake Street area. And they had been put on notice that they were going to lose their lease. But the owner of the block said, I've got another space. If you can come up with $50,000, you can purchase this space from me. Now, that was like double their annual budget. And they had just a little bit of time to pull it together. So by the time I was brought on, there was about 6 weeks left to find that money. And I was a part of a group called Arts Lab. Arts Lab was a program of Arts Midwest. And so the woman that was running the program said, could you just fit this into your work on the side? And I want to bring you in to talk to this group of people. And so I met with the executive director, a couple of board members, and Sharon, my contact, and we cooked up a gathering. I said, what's your biggest space that we could have? And that was the gallery. It wasn't very big. And I said, who do we know? What elected officials, what neighbors, what artists? So the board, I think there was maybe 4 or 5 board members, the staff, Sharon and I were tasked with filling the room at 8:00 on a Friday morning. And we inserted the culture. So it started with a drumming exercise. Chief of the Native community spoke first, welcomed people and did a blessing. The executive director thanked and gave a little bit of the excitement of what this opportunity was. And then an artist spoke. And then they turned the program over to me. And I divided people into, we just counted off 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Got into groups of 4. And I asked them questions like, what's the value of this gallery in the community? What actions might you personally take to keep them here? By when would you do that? And I had a couple other questions. I don't remember what they were. We curated all that information on a big, group of Post-it notes. They raised $80,000 in 3 weeks. This tiny little organization. Wow. They were able to purchase, they're still in existence, but they were shocked with how simple it was to have a conversation that was candid and vulnerable and no expectation. They also raised some money that day. People, as we were leaving, people said, well, can we give now? And, I don't know how much, a couple $1,000s. But the point was, we take sort of for granted the support of our community, right? Whether they're our subscribers or our donors or our artist community. But when we bring them all together in a group and pair them up with each other and let them talk to each other, and we inspire them. That artist had some pretty powerful things to say about, this is the only place I could get my art shown. People wanted to be more a part of that. So I tell that story. There wasn't a lot of social media involved. It was a lot of just picking up the phone. A couple of small grants were achieved. Some individuals came forward, but people on the city council were able to slot some money. And there was just this synergy that happened that would have never happened had we not brought all those people together. And we're in that kind of time right now where some organizations are really in a bit of a crisis mode.
Lori, that's incredible. I mean, there's a lot of takeaways just from that one story. I appreciate that. I feel like I already know the answer to this one, but at this time, and really anytime, what is the best advice that you would give to executive directors, board members, and other fundraising professionals?
My advice is don't hold back. Be vulnerable, be regular in your communication, and do your best to inspire people to at least ask you more questions, if not give. Doesn't mean every conversation has to be an ask conversation.
Excellent. And real quick, can you give us your top 5 again?
Know your numbers, connect with your community, share specifics about the lives being touched, share specifics about what it takes to fully fund your mission, and then pick up the phone. And through all of that, listen.
Lori, I know that you have a webinar coming up through Grant Station. So what can you tell us about this webinar and how can people access it?
Well, thanks for asking. It's on April 1st, April Fool's Day. We won't be fooling anyone. We're going to go a bit deeper into this conversation. The title of the webinar is How to Fundraise During Times of Fear and Uncertainty. And we also leave a good amount of time, and I'll probably leave more time in that 90-minute session for questions than I usually do, because everybody's got their own, angle of what do I do? Grant Station does a nice job of recording and then allowing people to purchase that session later. But it is April 1st at 1 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Eastern, and you can go to the Grant Station website, or I can share a link with you too, if you'd like, Kevin, and we can put it in the show notes.
Absolutely. We will definitely put that in the show notes. Lori, I cannot thank you enough for your time today. This has been enlightening for me, and I'm excited to share this with our audiences.
Well, thank you. I was just delighted and tickled to be invited. It's good to see you, reconnect with you, and I just wish you all the best. And this time that we're in, what I would tell your listeners is don't do it alone. Podcasts are a good resource, but then listen to it with 2 colleagues and then talk about it. Listen to it with your board and then talk about it. Just don't be in isolated territory right now. That's not a good place to be.
Excellent. Lori, I think that's a perfect way to end this. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Wow, this was a really incredible story to listen to, as well as information sharing. I've never been somebody who worked directly in development or fundraising. I've definitely helped write grants and have been a part of that storytelling and data finding process. But hearing stories from people that have directly worked in that world and just how their flow of work is so much different than the programming side is always super interesting to me. And clearly, Lori is incredible at what she does. What I've sort of been chewing on about this interview is about how she talks so much about local and regional funding. She doesn't exactly say that, but I think when we're talking about unknowns at other levels of funding, it's really important to think about those local and regional people, because you're always going to live in the same place. And at times when things do get uncertain, I think that that is a really important place to look, and maybe even looking at like smaller dollar donations where that story piece of it is so much more important because you're talking about people that are directly in that community. But I also think a lot of this conversation underscores the thing that we've talked about for years across the industry, in that we need more multi-year funding. And I know that that's challenging on a lot of different levels, but especially if people are looking at changing the way that they're fundraising, somewhere along the way, you need to take out some amount of the risk or some amount of the uncertainty, and trying to pepper into these like very frank conversations, things about, rather than just this one-time gift of a certain amount, like really talking about that need for longer term commitments.
Yeah, and I think that that's part of the conversation with your local donors, is building those relationships so that you have that consistent funding. And I think it's a good conversation for those of us who are donating to maybe think about that as well, is like making that internal commitment to say, hey, I'm going to give to this organization for 3 years. Making that commitment, even at a smaller level, I think helps add some consistency for those folks as well. Danielle, I do think you are absolutely right. There are some organizations, as we all know, that are looking into that. I know the state of Illinois, for the Illinois Arts Council, is looking at and will be doing multi-year funding, which I think is pretty great. And hopefully more granting organizations will move to that as well.
The one thing that I really took away from this is the importance of gratitude and acknowledgement. It all depends on how you're doing it and how you're managing donations and donors and clients, whether you've got a CRM that you're working with or not, because you can easily have a CRM automatically send a thank you that automatically fills that role. But you can also set notifications for whenever you get something, especially through an online portal, to where you can then also give that personal touch, whether it's text or a phone call or an email, and some sort of a personal acknowledgement to that donor of, hey, thank you so much. This means so much, and here's what it will help do. I think that's an important part of the thank you, is this is what it's going to help us achieve. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I also thought it was great that she talked about the fact that like it didn't, almost like saying it didn't need to be perfect. It just needed to be like, relatively quick. So a text, a quick email. And, I think sometimes, especially me, I know I overthink those things. And so maybe it's just pulling the trigger and doing it.
Well, and I think that lends, that sort of almost instantaneous recognition, even if it's not perfect, plays into how she distinguished between fundraising and fund development. And I love how she defined those two things, and they are different. So it's building a landscape, building an understanding of what your organization is, what the funding goes towards, how it's impacting people, and those relationships. And so that is one way that you can really do that fund development, just beyond garnering the gift, right? And the point that she made, that research shows that if a board member makes a phone call, like the next gift from that donor is likely to be so much larger. That sort of blew my mind. And I think that is a great way for boards of especially smaller organizations to make a huge impact and support staff in fundraising goals and fund development goals. It doesn't take that long to run a list of donations you've received in the last week and send it to a board member and say, hey, can you make these 5 phone calls? Right? But you could have huge returns off of instituting that practice.
That's also great data to support getting away from the model of boards that require a financial gift or a financial gift at a certain amount. Is if, using 20 minutes of your day to make those phone calls and you get that much more in the gifts. I mean, right, it's still money in the bank, no matter where it comes from. And making the phone calls is a way of building a much stronger local network and a much stronger local support. The other thing Lori said is like, not every conversation is an ask, right? It's really important that whenever you see that phone number come up, that it's not just like, oh, here comes Kevin again asking me for more money, but like an invitation to something, or a board member calling, a different kind of conversation.
Well, and I think that also plays into this idea of time, talent, treasure, ties, and testimony. It's not just the 3 T's of philanthropy anymore. It's the 5 T's. So again, that's time, talent, treasure, ties, and testimony. So bringing relationships to the table as a staff member or board member or volunteer, your testimony, being an advocate out in the community, and also the gift of time and your talent, right? So making those phone calls, setting up those conversations. I loved the story she told about the art gallery in Minneapolis and that gathering that they held that did garner the funding that they needed. But that was asking people to give of their time and ties and testimony more so than their treasure, at least initially, right? So I think that was a fantastic example of those principles in action.
I also thought the last thing that Lori said in this interview was so important, and it was don't do it alone and don't be isolated. And I do think that that's so important because, 5 years ago in the pandemic, I think we all really saw what we got when we talked more openly with our colleagues in other organizations and across the field. And I was in a lot more conversations that were a lot more frank, and those relationships have continued. And so if you're in a landscape where there's less funding, the instinct would be to become more isolated and to maybe not share as many resources or have those kind of candid conversations anymore. And, her point is really don't do that. We know that that's not the right thing. And, we have to be in this together.
So as Kevin, you and Lori talked about, things are changing very quickly, and there's a lot of things happening in the world, both local, state, and federal level. So if you are looking for a way to keep your finger on the pulse of what is happening in the world of philanthropy, I wanted to bring a few resources to the table. So there's some really great publications and newsletters that you can get delivered right to your inbox from places like Philanthropy Today, Inside Philanthropy, and Philanthropy News Digest. Those are some of my go-tos. I would also point you towards the Dorothy A. Johnson Center for Philanthropy at Grand Valley State University in Grand Rapids, Michigan. They're actually one of the leading philanthropy institutes in the country. They provide PD, applied research, resources, and tools for nonprofits and grant makers. They publish an annual trends report every single year. So they just released the one for 2025. I think it's worth taking a look at. So you can find them at johnsoncenter.org. But, taking a few minutes every day to sort of scan the news and what's going on, what's applicable to your organization, I think is well worth the time because things are moving so quickly. And there's a lot of great journalism happening out there, tracking these things and trying to make sense of it.
Excellent. That's great advice, Katie. Thank you all. And thank you, Lori, for taking the time out of your busy schedule and sitting down with me. It was great catching up with Lori. I met Lori in 2018 at one of her classes, and it was highly valuable and definitely impacted my career. So it was nice being able to catch up with her again. So Lori, thank you for your time. And as always, we'll see you next week.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening to There's No Business Like. Our producers and hosts are Brian Zelmer, Josh Benson, Kevin Maynard, Katie Miller, and me, Danielle Van Hook. Views expressed in this podcast are ours alone and are not reflective of the organizations we are a part of. Keep up with us at nobusinesslike.com. There you'll find links to all of our episodes and socials. If you like this podcast, give us a like, a follow, a review, or our favorite, a 5-star rating. Oh, wait, what was that site? I got it, don't worry. It is nobusinesslike.com. Do I sound out bus-I-ness every time I type it? Yep, sure do. Stay in touch, my friends.
Yeah. No, I would agree with that, Danielle. I use it a lot for like brainstorming and when I'm like hitting a like writer's block or I need something that I just, can't come to my mind. Like right now, I could use it to write this intro.